time. And this is the second of the series today. I'd like to make a short summary of what the Dharma Master talked about last week. And he gave a fantastic talk. And I can summarize quickly two things, all right? One is that he talked about the use interest net as an example, that to show that we are in a relational home. And this home is, we are all interconnected and reflecting all the wonderful things in the universe, because we're all reflecting of each other. And with that, he talked about the notion of global ethics, which is the essence of Buddhism. And in that, of course, there are, in the ancient times, we also have in the East, Confucius talking about a universal society, 大同世界. And Mencius talk about also similar things, taking care of not only your young, but other people's youngster, as well as other people's old folks, all right? And similarly, in the West, there's the notion of utopia, which provides a similar idea. All right. So, in this sense, that Dharma Master, basically, my interpretation of that is that as we are in a relational home, the whole universe, and in particular, our human society is a relational home. So whatever we do, we need to take responsibility of, not only to ourselves, our family, but for the whole relational home, all right? And so this is the two great aspects that Dharma Master taught us about the fundamentals of how Buddhism can be applied in the world today. This evening, we are having two outstanding speakers who are presenting a joint work of how Buddhism can be applied to psychoanalysis and vice versa. So this is not a simple application of Buddhism to one field, but merging of the two fields to produce results that benefit both fields. And I think this is the kind of thing that the world needs today, all right? The notion of transdisciplinary thinking. Because what does discipline mean? Discipline means you have a self-limiting boundary. I remember when I was a professor some 40-some years ago, the president of Harvard University tried to get going a program on multidisciplinary. And it took him 6 years to get it done. But multidisciplinary is not transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary means merging of the discipline together. Multidisciplinary means you have to utilize, in solving the problem, you need to utilize different disciplines to achieve tackling complex problems. And today, let me see if I can find the poster that for us. Oops, not this one. This is, and the title of the talk
所以今天我们讨论的主题是
the title of the talk is Prajana Psychoanalysis ? And it will be the two speakers are Dharma Master Heng Yin and Dr. Vives Lupus. And oops. Sorry. And Dr. Dharma Master Heng Yin has been a Dharma Master for more than 30 years. And she met the Master while she was a graduate student at the University of Texas in Austin. And then then a year later, she became a nun at the CTTB. And let's see, I'm trying to find the poster for Dr. Lupus. No. This channel. Dr. Well, this is in Chinese. Dr. Lupita Vives is a clinical. Okay, maybe Dharma Machine. Maybe you can recommend. You can introduce.
Okay, sure. I can introduce.
And then you can start. Okay.
Okay, no problem. So, good evening, everyone. I will introduce my co-speaker tonight. Her name is, on the poster is Dr. Maria Guadalupe Vives Lopez, but for short, her name is Lupita Vives, Dr. Vives. She has a PhD in psychoanalytical clinical work and a master's degree in psychoanalysis, and also one in Buddhist classics from Dharma Realm Buddhist University, as well as diplomas in psychosomatic ailments, focal and time-limited psychotherapy, and emotional development. She has several decades of experience teaching and consulting in schools, hospitals, and universities in a psychoanalytical role, as well as taking clients in private consultation. Her lifelong passion has been to try to bridge psychoanalytical understanding with the principles and practices of Buddhism. So I will begin by sharing our screen. We have some slides to share with everyone. Okay. I'm going to first go here and then we'll do the slideshow. Can everyone see the full screen of the slides, or do I need to reshare the screen?
I can see the whole screen.
I can see it.
Full screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would also like to say that we were very happy to hear Dharma Master Sher's lecture last week to open this forum, and appreciated his many points on what Buddhism needs, the qualities that Buddhism has that make it very relevant for bringing solutions for the modern world with all of its problems. And very briefly, I think Lupita will go into this a little bit more, perhaps. He said Buddhism is egalitarian and democratic, It's psychological, it focuses on the mind, it's science-friendly, and also there's a need to reanimate the teachings to include the entire biosphere now. And he also encouraged everyone attending this forum to bring an open mind and a fresh perspective, curiosity, and a heart of caring with a wish to make the world a better place. So today we've been asked to share a little bit about our humble transdisciplinary exploration. And we also welcome your questions and ideas. So I'd also like to point out that today on the DRBA calendar is the celebration of Guanyin Bodhisattva's Leaving Home Day. And Guanyin Bodhisattva actually has some significance. She is the first Bodhisattva that I learned about and am still learning from. This Bodhisattva is known for taking many forms to reach living beings and to help them. So for example, Buddhists recognize the Virgin Mary as one of Guanyin Bodhisattva's forms. And one of, what's happening here? There we go. One of the Virgin Mary's manifestations was in 1531 in Mexico as the Our Lady of Guadalupe, who appeared in a miraculous fashion to a Mexican peasant. And Lupita is actually named after this Maria de Guadalupe. So besides being a Buddhist herself, she also has this connection with Guanyin Bodhisattva through her name. And Guan Shi Yin means the one who contemplates the sounds of the world or who listens to the cries of living beings in the world. And this could mean listening to both inner and outer living beings, listening to those beings inside our heart, inside our psyche, and cultivating a compassionate awareness and a fearlessness that returns us to our awakened nature. So the two of us, coming from different disciplines and cultures and countries, have a shared interest in learning to do what Guanyin Bodhisattva does so perfectly in her various forms. So we decided to try to translate between our fields and understandings to create a combined approach that brings the depth and the rigor of both fields to bear on the work of understanding and transforming hearts and minds and spirits and activating each one's inherent wisdom. So we came up with this half joking and half serious title, Prajana Psychoanalysis, ? To kind of capture that. And maybe at this point, I can see if Dr. Vives would like to add anything.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Dharma Master Yin. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I would like to say that this has been a very, for me, a very auspicious encounter, because I got to meet Dharma Master Yin when I was there in CTTB for a translation seminar. And what took me there actually was to have listened to Reverend Shore's Avatamsaka Sutra lectures on the 12 links precisely. And when I was asked to translate that without even knowing who he was or where he was, where he was and what he was doing, I just got to understand how much of a resonance that had with my own kind of work in my consultation space and in everything that I've done, also in my teaching of psychoanalytical clinical work. And from then on, it became a very deep interest in getting to know more about the place itself, about the way Buddhism was being taught and being practiced there. And so I carried on translating his lectures, and he didn't even know. And also that happened with Dr. Marty Verhoeven's lectures on the sixth patriarch. So I was like taking in all of those things that they were saying, and also increasingly becoming aware of how much of that had to do with what, as I say, what I have been doing in my own work. So when I was then invited to participate in that seminar of translation of Buddhist texts, I was very eager to go there and just get to know what was that about that they were doing. From then on, it was just an immediate connection with Dharma Master Yin. And even though at that moment we were just translating, we got to talk a little bit about her own knowledge of Yogacara. And again, we found a lot of things to talk about and to explore. And after I finished my master's in Buddhist classics, we just kept on talking and having a dialogue and a conversation. And that dialogue, as she explained already, ended up in this joint effort. So I was thinking about, so why, as she mentioned, why this title, why Prajana Psychoanalysis, and why trying to bring these two approaches together when there's so much that has been said. For example, that East and West approaches in working with the mind pull in opposite directions, and also that their methodologies either collide or dismiss each other. And it's also being said that frequently regular Buddhist practice shows a kind of spiritual bypassing sometimes, and that sometimes that promotes weakness or submissiveness in hierarchical structured institutions, or that sometimes like an incomplete Buddhist practice is biased against science and open-minded perspectives. And sometimes that it's also, there's a bias against getting too close to emotions or too closely related to laity or to non-Buddhists or to other disciplines or other cultures. And it's also been said frequently that, you know, in regards to psychoanalytical theory or psychoanalytical method, that it's arrogant, that it might be elitist, that it might entail a never-ending dwelling in endless, useless, and very likely wrong narrative of past experiences that is just not useful anymore, that it's probably manipulative, that it can be scientifically cold, or that it might be focused on illness like neurosis or psychosis, and maybe label building. So as meaning that one can have a very rigid, sick structure, or that even psychoanalysis can be against religious ideas and practices because they avoid the blind spots in the analytical work for self-understanding or group behavior. But in spite of all these sayings and these coming and goings of sometimes doubts and dismissiveness on each side, and also then on the opposite, like interest in both sides of trying to get to know each other in these approaches, we have seen that actually, as Reverend Shore said last week, that to begin with, Buddhism is the religion of analysis, and that it is centered in the human experience, and it is mind-centered. So I would say that in that sense, contemporary psychoanalysis, which is of course not as it has been misunderstood as a psychology of the self. And it's not a neuroscience, so we don't open the skull to get to know about like mind processes and mind states and functionings of the mind and everything else. It's about also centering ourselves in the mind, and also it's human experience centered. So just to begin with, there are so many resonances and so many things that we are just speaking about, very similar issues, that immediately got, as I said, Dharma Master Yin and myself in a deep conversation about those things. Even we found out that like one of the words that is so relevant in Buddhism, which is Bhagavan, and it's an epithet of the Buddha or the Blessed One or the Exalted One. Actually, its Pali root is many times linked to this meaning of to analyze, to fragment, to divide in like elements that can be understood to be able to then change and transform. So in a broader sense, like we thought like, well, it's just like the ultimate analyst. So it became a very interesting conversation that we would like to share with you. So Dharma Master Yin, do you want to carry on?
The master, you are muted.
Oh, sorry. Okay, anyways, I was just saying that transdisciplinary was just presented as emerging, but while there's emerging, there's also an attempt to preserve the depth and the rigor of each discipline, like the fullness of each discipline, and not just taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that and doing something together. So this is our hope anyways. And so our presentation is kind of structured along these questions. First explaining, which we have already kind of done, how this combined approach was born, and then sharing some ideas about what each side can offer to the other, and how the whole approach may be helpful to people today. So, and then again, saying a little bit about ourselves. For me, some of the resonances were in the literature, but also in the actual helpfulness, because when Lupita was here in DRBU studying, I had a chance to ask her for advice whenever there were people that were suffering from some mental confusions or disturbances, some quite serious, to the point that they were perhaps not able to stay in our community, but with support from her and some other professionals and peers, I was able to understand a lot more, kind of using this a more discerning way to understand both somebody who was perhaps suffering from a mental confusion and disturbance, how they were feeling, and to understand that they were still very human and also very lonely, afraid of stigma and of being rejected, and very confused, but still also having a lot of capacity to be helped. And at the same time, those who were perhaps afraid after hearing about this condition, making some assumptions or judgments about them, to kind of give them some information on what might be helpful, to be patient and to use loving kindness and to be inclusive and caring and not afraid, because they're undergoing something, but it's like our own experience. It's a complex human experience that is not just single faceted, so that there are things that we can do with our attitude and our actions that would, if not help with the healing, at least not to collaborate in worsening the situation or to destroy this already very fragile mind. So through this kind of experience, and seeing some people regain their stability and to be able to reintegrate into our community and to become functional and contributing as well. I mean, a lot goes to thank all the many people who have been helped, who have given their help, and makes me really joyful that we can keep, people within our community or our sangha with this kind of support. So that was one thing that led me to be even more interested in learning about this. And then I started to read some of the research articles that from the psychoanalytical field. But then I also realized that reading was not enough. Just like in the Dharma, we really need to cultivate, to practice it, to understand it. So I also began my own analytical journey, and through over the course of a year or so, I saw clear internal growth and change within myself, and I realized slowly but surely the damaging power of my own self-doubt, guilt, and fear decreasing. So as time goes on, I'm diving ever more deeply into the layers of my own personality to understand how I came to hold certain limiting views of myself and the world. I feel more grounded in my own intuitions, aims, and decisions, more free to choose without being ruled by others' opinions. So there's a subtle sense of joy and spontaneity that comes from being comfortable in my own skin, knowing and appreciating myself rather than doubting and denigrating myself inside. So some of that, it's all a work in progress, of course. And at least I'm finding more space for myself. But this is not really to talk about myself, but just that I also felt there was interest on the side of Lupita with her analysis. She already uses some Buddhist methods and ideas in her analytical work, in her clinical work. But now there was an idea of having me to present some teachings, some sutras, some meditations to these people who are mostly not Buddhist, and so that they can apply them in their daily life situations. So this is something that I was really interested in, and that's why we began. And then on her part, I think there was the ability to offer psychoanalytical illumination of certain things that are unconscious when we are practicing, and we kind of think we know what we're doing, but then there are some things that we are blind to that maybe keep hindering us from going further on our cultivation. So so that's something that she could also offer to those who are on the Buddhist path. Yeah. Lupita, would you like to say anything at this point?
Well, yes, I would maybe go into a little bit of, perhaps, as you said, maybe to our slide number 5, to that that you could mention some of the things that have been used already in that practice of some of the Buddhist regular, practices that you do, that we are having, that being done with our joint efforts?
Okay, sure. This slide, of course, is very far from complete. It's just almost an arbitrary, random collection of some of the things that the Buddha Dharma encompasses, at least from my understanding. For example, I myself came to Buddhism primarily because of wanting to understand the mind. Having come out of computer science and some attempts there to model the human thinking process and language process in a machine, it drove me to really want to understand my own mind much better. So I was super interested in meditation and the sutras for that reason. So also wanting to see our true nature, our awakened nature, that is underlying everything. But in order to do that, we have to understand and transform these afflictions that cover up and cloud over the mirror of our wisdom. And then only then can we open up our wisdom and end the cycle of suffering in samsara with every single thought that is confused. And then also there's the Bodhisattva path, where we want to help everyone to awaken and not just liberate ourselves. So down below are some of the teachings, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, like the 10 paramitas, and the 4 boundless hearts, or Brahma Viharas, kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity or giving. 3 non-outflow studies, holding the precepts, practicing samadhi, and then to develop our wisdom. And then also ways of looking at reality through the 10 Dharma realms. 10 kind of, you could say they're states of mind or states of cosmology too. 100 Dharmas is also a basic framework for classifying the states, the constituents of our experience, whether related to our mind or not. And then the 12 links of dependent arising, which Lupita mentioned, describing how our things arise from conditions and then continue and then cease, being able to see that in our own experience. On the other side, some things like meditation, studying the sutras, the teachings, dedicating the merit to others, reciting mantras, sutras, Buddha's name, repenting of our past faults, mistakes done out of confusion, taking refuge with, you could say, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha within our nature, or externally, taking the precepts as guidelines for our behavior, making vows, setting intentions, and so on and so forth. But these have, we have had some, we have a study group, study and practice group of Lupita's, some analysans who are interested in learning about the Buddha Dharma and using that, incorporating that into their own work with the mind. And so each time we meet, which is once every couple weeks or so, we will choose some of these things to introduce, based maybe on whatever situation they're going through in their own mind work, something that's relevant. Okay, so I'll move to the next slide, and Lupita, maybe you can.
Well, just to go back to why why would a psychoanalytical approach, why would that be useful, like both ways, for someone that is maybe Buddhist but not a monastic, or people who are non-monastics and maybe not Buddhists, and then the other way around. Why would this approach be useful for, Buddhism for psychoanalytical work, and then psychoanalytical work for Buddhist practitioners or cultivators? So in this conversation, I would like to begin with mentioning that even though, of course, we know that psychoanalysis as a methodology for treating like the so-called nervous illnesses, and also seen as an epistemological tool, meaning that it was like a seed for more discoveries of the human psyche and how the mind worked, and bringing in like new theoretical body of understanding, and also as kind of a kind of sociological or philosophical side of it, in hoping that kind of understanding the mind and trying to like be very observant and be very scientific, so to speak, in trying to end the suffering that was at that moment like thought to be born in the psyche, and that of course was being reenacted in the body, like manifesting the body. That was born in Europe, as we know. And Freud began with this kind of putting together all of what I have been already mentioning. And of course, some of his like first disciples, such as Jung and others, began to just like add on whatever was being built as an understanding. But what we are using now, and psychoanalysis has moved so much and evolved so much and has brought in so much more useful ways of understanding and also of working in this transformational effort, which we will now call a name as contemporary psychoanalysis. So it's way beyond Freud and Jung, and of course, as I mentioned, it is not like illness-based or experimentally based in any way. It's about basing ourselves in the understanding of the human experience, of the mind as the center of everything, of course, because the mind, everything comes from the mind, and then in that sense we completely agree with Buddhism, and especially that it's how is it functioning. So in this way of doing things, in this like analytical relationship, as we call it, we are being presented to our unconscious contents and mind functioning, in the sense of like, so what or who is there, or what and why is it happening? And all of this to be able to get like deeper into the observance of who we think we are, what we in sometimes Buddhisms call like what's our identity or what's ourself, and can we let ourselves go? So we pay attention to this damaging narcissism, and also these relational reenactments of transference phenomena. What do we mean by that? We mean about this like self-centeredness that sometimes we call like the pathological self, and the kind of the rigidity and the wrong views about who one is or what the others are, and also this thing about unconsciously redirecting or transferring to present situations things or situations or feelings that have happened in the past, in other situations, but doing that in such an unconscious way that we are just, of course, just complicating our present moment and mixing everything up without even becoming very aware of all that. So in that sense, that and much more happens in this like psychoanalytical joint effort. In regards to why would we think that this is useful in our cultivation? Some of the things that I have encountered also, like as a psychoanalyst and being inside different institutions and being able to study there and be part of that, and also in Buddhist communities as well. And I have seen and people have been honest about sharing that sometimes this, like what has been called like spiritual bypassing, how to overcome that, which means like this dysfunctional, like maybe unnoticed dysfunctional self-defense mechanisms or distortions that subtly but very surely generate this split between our, like what we understand of our Buddha nature and the humanist within us. So in trying to be and help with this honest view of what we are doing, even in our cultivation. So notice what is happening that might be ignoring, you know, what we think we are, what we think we're doing, what are the states of mind that we are in. And all this, as I mentioned before, this may be psychological phenomena and emotional wounds that are there dwelling in the unconscious part of our minds. And that, of course, as they are born within a relationship, then again, within a relationship, they can be helped to come up to our conscious mind so that we are able to actually become fully aware of that and therefore help our own transformation and our own relationship with ourselves, with others, and with our own cultivation practice, of course. In that sense, also part of what we use, which is dreams. But in this kind of work, understanding them as an unconscious thinking process that uses symbolic forms and fantasy operations, and also that they are there to, if understood properly, that they are very useful to be able to understand what's going on, as it's many times being mentioned in whenever we are studying even Buddhism and Buddhist theory. And what I mean about symbolic formations and forms, I am referring to whatever represents ideas or qualities of mind or just mind states of relations or types of functioning that are there and that are represented by something. So just to be able to be much more observant and attentive of that, and being able to just use all that well for how to understand ourselves in a much better way, and therefore to help in this transformational work that we are trying to do. So in that sense, we have found out that joining these two approaches helps both. And it brings all that Buddhism as a cultivational practice offers, such as, for example, a compassionate and a loving kind and a patient way of working with ourselves and trying to really set aside the judgmental side of ourselves with ourselves, towards ourselves, and with others as well. And then the other way around, to bring in this paying attention in depth to whatever we think that we are actually doing in our cultivation, but it's not really working. Because for me, it has been very painful to see, even some of my own peers there and my own classmates when I was studying in different Buddhist communities, that sometimes this frustration or maybe sadness or just like angst also that comes when people feel that in spite of their efforts, they feel that they are not progressing very much. And I've really thought that it has to do with something else that is not happening, which is this in-depth looking at their own subjectivity and their own contents of mind and their own mind functioning in specific situations and specific moments.
Hey, Lupita, there's a
Yes.
question.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, Fasha.
You want to answer it while we're on the slide?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Because I was just going to return the mic to you.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, I'm trying to understand the spiritual bypassing. Is it the inability or not wanting to self-reflect on our actions and how they affect others, ourselves or others around us? I think for me, an example of this would be a common one is that we often say, oh, it's my karma when something happens to us, or it's a demonic state or something, without actually looking very closely at what's perhaps going on inside our minds and emotions. And then when we do that, then I'm not sure it's an inability or just a habitual way of thinking that we don't really look at what's going on, or maybe know how to look at it. Lupita, do you want to add anything?
Well, yes, I was thinking about precisely some of maybe just some of the quotes that we have later on.
Yeah.
But this thing about like in sometimes in regular practice when we sidestep or avoid this facing unresolved issues or just like inner wounds or unconscious, as I say, like psychological phenomena that's going on, or just unfinished developmental processes inside, for example, that I didn't, for example, like not having really understood why maybe a constant sense of guilt is there, and then trying to say, well, okay, just don't pay attention to that and just let it go, or whatever. And sometimes that those kind of feelings just come back and come back and come back. So why? Just to be able to allow that without the judgmental feeling and without like allowing those things to be paid attention to, and to try to understand, so why is that recurrent feeling or recurrent distraction, so to speak, why is it there so much? And many times, of course, just being and feeling like, well, I just have to be compassionate with myself and I have to just let go that guilty feeling that is recurrently there, might not be enough. And that's why some of the people that I have been working with, and you know them too, Asher, some of them, they might feel like that is not allowing me to even feel that I am cultivating properly. And I don't know whether I am just someone that is not a proper cultivator, or I'm not understanding anything about what cultivation is, or what's happening to me. And that brings about many other, like a cascade of other feelings that might completely obstacle, maybe a really good moment of just observing the mind and then being able to work, after a meditation session, so to speak, to work with whatever was happening there or was coming up over and over and over. So that's what I say about sidestepping or avoiding, like facing those unresolved or just like haven't been able to comprehend in depth what has been happening. And that is something that, of course, in another space at another moment can be brought up that is very useful to understand in depth and then be able to overcome those obstacles to then return to a practice that can be a lot more satisfactory, meaningful, and even, like favoring this spiritual growth that we, of course, try to attain.
Let me cut in a little bit because time is running out pretty soon. So I think we can't afford to get into too much detail, technical detail, because I'm not sure the audience will understand. But what I'd like to know from each of you is that how does combined effort help you, Lupita, as an analyst, and help you, Dharma Jin, as a cultivator? And then we can answer some questions from the audience.
Yes, after you, Fasher.
I thought I already shared a little bit of that. I think we have, in the next few slides, we have some cases of, including myself, but of other Buddhist cultivators who have benefited from psychoanalytical work, or combining it with our practice.
Or maybe we should go through that couple slides first.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go. Here's I'll just read. I think there's only 3 or 4 slides. I'll just go through some of the highlights. So this is somebody who's saying helps to deepen awareness and understanding of early life stages and the functioning of our family or community within ourselves, so that we can become healthier in different areas. And also, like was just mentioned, seeing some of the connections and to the dysfunctions, different dysfunctions within ourselves, so that we can actually work through them and have a better freedom to be. Also, going to something, it becomes a more intuitive awareness in working in this way, and also allowing us to accept what's in ourselves, with all of our unconscious conflicts, angsts, and arrested development, some parts of ourselves that are not fully mature, so that we can face them and work on modifying them to avoid repeating harmful patterns. I think those are all very key things that can help us in cultivation. Here is another one that's commonly we talk about no self, and people think that means like denying our own experience, that just kind of dismissing it. But then we have nothing to stand on and nothing to work with. Actually, emotional experiences hold the key to understanding and transformation. So one cultivator said, I was cultivating and working hard, but I ended up with a life-threatening illness. Yes, I have to accept my karma, but I wanted to understand what I was doing wrong. And through psychoanalytical work, I was able to see how at an unconscious level, I was angry, disappointed, and melancholic, and even wanted to die. But now, in contrast, I'm able to understand myself in depth with a mindset of unconditional love, which I hadn't incompletely practiced before. So, and even acting on an unconscious assumption that I could end suffering by ending life. So working towards death instead of liberation. But realizing this unconscious kind of wrong view has really turned that person's life around.
So let me ask a question in this sense. In other words, as a cultivator, through the Buddha Dharma, you could have solved the problem if you're able to break through, all right, because the Dharma is there. On the other hand, the psychoanalytical approach allow you to provide you a tool to find a breakthrough earlier or easier, so to speak, right? Because people who got enlightened clearly have tackled this problem through their cultivation. But for ordinary cultivators, the analytical addition probably help them to make that breakthrough a little easier. Am my interpretation correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a tool that can be useful for some people, and then some people may not need it if they have really, really good foundation and advanced spiritual, roots. Then maybe they can do it on their own. But at least it has been helpful for some of us. Yeah. And then it also has increased our, the understanding of the Dharma that maybe we have been studying and practicing for many years or decades. So it may even help to make it come alive, make some of the things like more real. Once our minds are working better, and also we can have a psychoanalytical interpretation of some of the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, liberating the living beings in the mind, that's something we vow to do. But now we can actually, maybe with this approach, see our inner beings as described in, say, the 10 Dharma realms, really occurring within ourselves. I mean, this is already described in many sutras. The Sixth Patriarch talks about it, that these are all within ourselves and we have to cross them over. And so this is maybe making it real that we have a way to actually identify and work with them in a very concrete and way, not just intellectually, not just, intentionally wanting to, or so. And then of course, it's nice to, because we may be able to have some, a teacher or a peer who is able to help us in somewhat of a way, but to have a trained person who is, devoted to actually help being there for the person who is engaged in this journey, to truly listen and to hold up the mirror to help them understand where they're at whenever they're having some blind spots, or when the unconscious is not being seen, but is wanting to be heard or seen, then this helps a lot. So
I would add, Kasher, or maybe just complete what you were saying, and going, maybe if we go to slide number 13, and if we take into consideration what you're mentioning about this concept of this thing about liberating the living beings in my mind.
Okay.
Understanding that, for example, what is there that is very much alive, that is really something that I need to do or to see and then transform, that is there damaging me. For example, one of our of the people that we work with, just to see that living being be this huge irrational guilt that was contributing so much in the genesis of this person's leukemia, for example. And that was like a complete shift in the understanding of what was there for her. And not only staying in this idea of, well, maybe that's my karma, as you said, but understanding that there's something there that could be very much alive, like this kind of living being that was completely hurting her, like a poison that she had to understand what it was made of and really transform. And that helped a lot in, to begin with, making that person increasingly responsible for her damaging ways of functioning and her immature, maybe, vision of things, and of course her relational world. And in doing that, along with her treatment and everything else, of course, because it's like an interdisciplinary work, and these cultivation practices has brought that person a complete, you know, like the leukemia is not there anymore and hasn't been there for 10 years. And that's also bringing in, as you were asking, Mr. Ye, so what can Buddhism bring to a work like that? And I would say that the virtuous practices that that bring in, let's say, like the humbleness or the loving kindness or the unconditional love to herself and to like others as well, has brought this integral way of viewing herself and taking herself in her own hands. So to be able to transform that reality of her, that is to begin with an internal reality, and then be able to work with those poisons and really overcome those mind functionings, and of course becoming healthier.
Do you want to say anything about the second one, or should we be taking questions?
Well, yeah, maybe if there's another question, Fashion.
There's a question, you know.
Is there another question?
No. Yes. There's another question, right?
I haven't seen any in the chat. We already answered one question, or kind of answered. So I guess this is supposed to be a forum. So if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat.
Okay, here's a question for Lupita.
Yes.
Can you see it?
What advice? That one?
In the chat box?
The one just came in saying, what advice would you provide to an individual facing fears?
Earlier, yeah.
The earlier one we already answered.
No, there's the one I'm going to answer.
Well, the question is...
I see, okay.
Thanks for the interesting dialogue. In this age, people's basic morality and their sanity declining. We can't do much on wars and criminal activities, but how about LGBT, bisexual, and all that? So, can you answer that?
Well, as I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding whether this is like.
Okay, let's read the whole question. Let me read the rest of it.
Well, the video is muted.
Says we can't do much on wars and criminal activities, but how about LGBT? These are things that people have self-control and no one can force them. Let's see. Can't see the whole thing very clearly. Okay. There are more people obsessed on this. Once it is only mental illness suffered by the developed nations, but now has become the trend of developing nations. Does psychoanalysis discuss this matter, and what is your advice to them who suffer such mental illness?
Okay, so I would say that to begin with, for example, this is like maybe several topics here, and one would be, the first thing would be like, they say like wars and criminal activities. That is a very good point, because as we have, Dharma Master and myself have talked about this, we are not a kind of compassionate psychology thing, because it's not, we try to go so much to do so much more than just compassionate psychology as it's like all around, especially in the US, because that's not enough in our eyes. If we get to know more about the contents of mind, like, and also the structures that are there, structures, of course, understood in a non-rigid way. I mean, like the ways of functioning, we can be less naive on what a dysfunction of the mind or a misinterpretation of reality can do, as we know, like a mind that is sometimes functioning in a very wrong direction suddenly can just generate a whole tragedy, as it happens so very frequently in the world. And well, the US is the scenario of so many tragedies in that sense. And then people are like completely shocked. But actually, from a psychoanalytical point of view, there are always signs and symptoms of a mind that is going wrong and a mind that is malfunctioning, so to speak. And that would allow us to have interventions on time, precisely. So to provide much more in-depth understanding of this, along with a Buddhist approach in the sense of a virtuous and a way in which a non-judgmental attitude can come along in this in-depth understanding, is just really, really beneficial. And then in regards to these transgender things, I am not sure whether the question is implying that they are mental illnesses or just dysfunctions or just immature ways of maybe of functioning or just developmental deviations or whatever. This is an ongoing topic, and it's very interesting because I would say that maybe it's a little bit of everything that I have mentioned now. And of course, psychoanalysis has a really interesting conversation and discussion going on around those things. And many of these confusional identities, including sexual orientations, are the result of these confusing times as well. And I'm not saying that all of these people are confused in any way. I'm just saying that all of these discussions are coming up in a very chaotic way because so much has not been allowed to be brought to the discussion table. And that's why I think this fresh perspective of bringing in both approaches that is like courageous enough so as to open up these topics for discussion, taking into account our combined approach to be able to understand what is there in our minds in this generation and in this present day would be very, very useful to be able to promote psychological maturity and also a real sense of responsibility for the world and for ourselves and for the world, and return to the human experience that Reverend Shur so much talked about. To be successful in practicing the Dharma by being analytical cultivators and also like virtuous analysts of ourselves, like to really come together in this indispensable, I would say, effort to be able to just survive,
Here's another question. Is it true to say that psychoanalysis can offer a snapshot of the causes of issues and practice of the Buddhism, offer the solutions?
Yes, I would say that because of this commitment to the observance of the human experience, and as we had, maybe in this one of our slides, that when we talk about the emotional experience there and what it entails and how the emotion understood as a first like messenger of the meaning of something that happened within a relationship, then we would provide those snapshots to be able to help in every way, actually, in this like thought process that could be the basis of a, you know, a wholesome life, actually, you know, instead of just rationalizing or just like repressing and doing everything else other than being in you know, in alignment with reality as it is, which is of course what Buddhism is also committed with, to just like really be and see reality as it is. And the psychoanalytical tool is committed to that as well.
Yeah. Do you want to ask another question? Okay, here's a question. I have to translate from Chinese. During this pandemic, young people's mental health is declining towards life and towards the future. They're kind of lost and don't know how to go. What are some suggestions or ways for them to be guided? It's a bad translation, but.
So what would you say, Pasha?
I think that, yeah, we all recognize the big and growing problem, and at the same time, I think with Buddhism, it's generally one mind at a time. I mean, like, you really have to transform within your own mind. There's no mass awakening, but there are ways that we could perhaps make this teaching more widely accessible through translating it the way we're trying to do into, you know, just in a mind functioning way that can people living in this modern world who have a psychological kind of perspective can work with without having to have a faith in a religion, but at the same time to also provide the practices of that we have in Buddhism in a way that can be very effective to somebody who is also getting help, committed to a analytical working with the mind. So they already have a very good foundation, really self-reflecting and looking at themselves closely, with the support of an analyst. And then when you share the Dharma with such people, it really takes off. It really lights a fire and can be very amazing for them. So, I mean, some of the later comments that we had in this slide would show their feedback on that. And at the same time, I think, yeah, it also would help those of us who are trying to cultivate this Buddhist path, which is a map from ordinary being to a fully perfect wisdom and, you know, awakened. And so it's a long journey, and but the psychoanalytical part at least could help us to start out working towards having a healthy human mind to begin with, so we have something clear and whole to work with as we go on this journey.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, again, reminding ourselves of what some of the very interesting things and that Reverend Shore mentioned last week, in saying that the purpose of the Dharma is to end suffering, and also that the Buddha's teachings, you know, were meant to be like kept in the vernacular. And this thing about the indispensable need to really talk about this, but also to do things. Because in this analytical work, I would say that the doing and the talking about it are very different functions of the whole process, but at the same time, both are the other side of one coin, so to speak. And we know that that is the same thing for Buddhism. It's like what we begin to know about it, and we are told and we are taught, but it has to be practiced. So it has to be it's a journey, as Fasher just mentioned. And that is what, if we have the tool, why not use it wisely? Because it's meant also to help in this transforming ourselves, in this mentoring process that we have all been, told that this is all about. So why not? Why not use it and use it wholeheartedly and deeply and responsibly? And for us, I would say that it has been a very meaningful and satisfactory joint effort, because we have seen so many good results that, I mean, even humbly and in a kind of a limited version of things, it has been very meaningful.
Should I pick another question, or does somebody want to ask it? Choose a question. Okay, here's one. Sometimes I feel very happy because cultivation allows my life to improve, get better and better, and I feel really happy inside. And sometimes there's a few small issues that make my emotions, stir my emotions up, and then I fail to control my temper and lose my temper, and then afterwards I'm very regretful. But at the time I felt like I had no power to control it. The best I could do was to hide away and recite mantras. If my own nature's strength is too weak, what should be done? That's the question.
Well, I would like to listen to what you say, Fasher. On my side, I would say that, of course, again, like the reciting and the practice is beautiful and essential. But then maybe what would complement that would be to just observe a little bit more. Why is this, like, the anxiety or the guilt or whatever that comes about is there so noticeably, to be able to then like decode that, so to speak, and to be able to do something about the intensity of those feelings that are messengers, again, as I would say, that help us, if we follow them and understand them non-judgmentally, to be able to let them go, but by understanding first. And of course, all the Buddhist practices are the ones that provide the spiritual backbone and the way, the virtuous way to get rid of those poisons, but also understanding them because they are there for a reason.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You have any conclusion to make in terms of the combination of the two fields? All right, we have some questions being answered, and you have also talked about the benefits of such a combination. All right, and so how would you conclude in terms of your future work that in this direction?
Maybe we can go back to our slides then, because we do have a few slides about the future future steps. Let me just try to... Okay, so first, just a quick mention of this study group that we have with the people who are engaged in analytical work in Mexico. They attend their own analytical sessions, and then also we have this group study cultivation session where we each time have a theme, and then we also incorporate movement, and then sutra study, and then the transdisciplinary kind of inquiry into what they learn in the sutras, and also what we all understand from the psychoanalytical side, and then also a meditation, and finally dedication of merit. So the next, and that has been going on for about a year, and then the next steps are to actually have some mini retreats and transdisciplinary events and the end of this year, beginning of next year, for these research participants and a few others, some others who are also interested in joining. And then because there's also some interest expressed from others who would like to form a similar type of group, but they have a different ability, language ability and background. So we would adapt it maybe to hold it fully in Spanish. And also Lupita and I would like to go back to our initial kind of exploring more of the conceptual and practical resonances between ourselves, really thinking more deeply now that we have been doing this kind of lab with other participants in a practice of this combined approach. And after that, we would be able to write a paper sharing the findings. And then in the future, if there were opportunities, we might be able to partner with individuals from some other disciplines to make it even more transdisciplinary, to enrich this combined approach, and or work with some other organizations to customize this approach for people from that field or that group. Yeah. Oops. And then that's pretty much it. We just try our best in this very very humble effort.
I have a question. There are lots of other questions, but I like to think in terms of the combined approach. Is very powerful in terms of our daily life. Give you an example. During the pandemic, if you look at the young people, all right, trauma is everywhere. They're confused. They are lost. They lost faith. So it seems to me, and not just my own personal observation, that the combined approach seems to provide a methodology, say for parenting, all right? The parents, I'm asking the question now, can the parents now, through, say, participating in your group, become a sort of analyst for their children, combined with Buddhist practice, for example, helping them to do meditation, things like that? Can the parent be joining your group, can take the role of analyst, so to speak, all right, to help their children instead of sending their children to the analyst?
Well, I would say that you're touching a very central topic in this contemporary psychoanalytic understanding of things, because the role of the thinking parents is fundamental. And when I'm saying about the thinking parents, I would say the ones that can understand and really get in touch of what the child is going through and to really be able to interpret the child's feeling and the child's situation. So in being able to, in a metaphor, to digest that emotion and that experience that a child is going through, especially now, as you say, in these very troubling times, is indispensable. And of course, a parent, I mean, I would say that parents are not analysts, but they can be analytical with their children. And that is very important because, of course, as we know, individual practice, individual work and insights are, of course, the work we do, and then we do that when we practice in Buddhism, also the Buddhist practices. But I would say that to be able to return to the relational and to be able to help others understand and, so to speak, digest the emotional experience that is involved in a situation is very important, because it all begins within a situation to begin with. We are the children of someone, and we were conceived in a relationship, and we are taught and we learn and we experience the world, and we are presented to the world, and the world is presented to us within a relationship. So of course the parents are fundamental in this returning the health, so to speak, the integral health and the wholesome view and the beauty, so to speak, the beauty and the wonder of the world and the mystery of the world to their children is fundamental, that the parents are there for them in that sense. But it's work. It's just to introduce them to those immediate meanings of what they are being exposed to, and they are like bringing into themselves. And because from there, they're going to be structuring their minds, and they're going to be functioning in that world. So yes, Mr. Ye, I would say that, of course.
Yeah, and if you agree to that, then it means that you can apply. For example, I can see in the future, you have different lotus groups, one for parents, one for teachers, one for colleagues in the organization, or for executives who are, you are providing them a way to not taking place of the analyst totally, but providing help in this relationship. All right, we're all in a relationship with the world. All right, through the family, through the corporation, through others.
Yes,
so in this way, otherwise we don't have enough analysts around, right? Like you, to help everyone. However, through this kind of group like you people are setting up for different, for parents, for things, you can focus on each group through, because basically what my rudimentary understanding of psychoanalysis, you're lending a ear, all right? But you don't have emotional attached to what your patients are talking about, all right? So, so in this sense, it's like Guanyin Bodhisattva. You're like a Guanyin Bodhisattva, listening and then try to help them to, so, but you provide specific tool, all right? So I think your future is very, very bright, because there's so much demand on this. If you can cater this kind of thing to you. Here is a comment from Linda from San Francisco. Basically, psychoanalysts help individuals look deep inside themselves to understand that they need to correct. With the Buddhist practice, it helps individuals to calm our mind, to find our problems, right?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yes, of course, but not only to calm the minds, but basically to understand our minds, which in turn calms the mind. A mind that doesn't understand itself is very restless. And so in trying to, for example, to meditate, we find that our mind is so restless. It's usually because there's something else that is not, something there that is not understood, and that mind is like demanding understanding. So it becomes restless. So it's some kind of a kind of virtuous circle that has to be done in order to become, as you say, Mr. Ye, like our own, in turn, to get into ourselves the analytical function in the best way possible, so as to then, move much more responsibly in the world. And that is a role model for others around us, be them our children or our colleagues or whomever. You just become a kind of a better functioning human being.
Right. So I see the great potential in this combined effort, because it helps every professional, every profession, and as well as family. All right. So if you can sort of synthesize this and combine with the Buddhist practice, well, the mindfulness is already a big deal. But now let's just take mindfulness as example, not as deep as what youth people are talking about, but in terms of you combining with mindfulness effort, which is at a pretty low level, the analytical side of it, all right? Because what do? You listen, you pay attention, but you're neutral, all right? You'll provide, this already, it will be a fantastic service to the world.
I would say that mindfulness is it's a very valuable first step, because without paying attention, there's nothing. If you begin by this paying attention in such a like really very aware of practicing the paying attention, and to have a one mind, as in Buddhism we say that is, being, again, going back to what Reverend Shore was mentioning, that we are responsible for our states of mind, and so we have to pay attention to them. So that's the first step, to be then able to see, so why, what's the cause of that state of mind, and what's the effect of that state of mind. So then to go into the causality of everything. And then, of course, if you don't like that, well, as he said, just change it. And for that, we can benefit a lot from help. Like when we go to the doctor, we know that we have some ailment, and we might know a lot about that. But then, why not go to the doctor to help us out?
Right.
Yeah, I agree that while we may get some analytical understanding through working in a group with an analyst, it's still not the same as truly getting the benefit of your own analytical exploration. And then through that, just as any area of expertise, the people who have devoted decades to it has something to offer that will not be the same as just joining a group but it will help. But so that's why our current model is to have parallel spaces. One is for the analytical journey, and one is for a study group. Maybe there will be another model for a different group, which is more focused on the cultivation side or something. But I think it's a little bit indispensable if we really want to get the true benefit to actually have a private, analytical kind of journey for working really on your own problems that you can only get kind of a general idea in a group setting.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, but I really think, if you can package these two things together, all right, this will be a fantastic help to the world today.
Mm-hmm. I was always also returning to also what was one of the things that was mentioned last week, that the dialogue between Buddhism and psychology has, begun a long time ago, and then recently it has increased. And of course, now we see that it's fundamental. And maybe sometimes it has been traditional psychology, and other times it's been neuroscience. And today, I think that more than ever, it's like the psychoanalytical way of doing things, and precisely going back to this idea that Buddhism is the religion of analysis, to be able to maybe focus a lot more on this thing about understanding causes and effects, to be able to then, in a very, as Dharma Master Yin just said, and place it in your own subjective condition, to be able to then feel like, what do I have to do? What is my own circumstance that I have to see and to change, to be able to then do something about that? Because just thinking about those things and eternally, intellectualizing everything is not very useful. The useful thing would be to just jump into action then, not impulsive action, but very, very deeply thought and very responsibly, but to actually do something about that.
Great. Well, our time is running out.
Yes.
And Dharma Master Yin, you have any final word to comment before we close?
No, maybe just say appreciate everyone's attention and interest, and also everyone who has supported this this work. Really appreciate that, and also the opportunity to share a little bit of it today on the TOEFL. Maybe we can. Okay.
Yeah, before we dedicate the merit, I'd like to announce that next week we have Venerable Master Jia from Taiwan, Great Compassion Institute, will share her experience about healing traumas. And they publish, collectively, they have published a book called The Mystery of Life, all right, through their collective work in helping last stage patients in Taiwan. And they also recently published, have rolled out a documentary, all right, about the whole experience. It's really, really fantastic. And Miss Nancy Chu will be the host for that. I'm not sure, Nancy, are you online?
I saw her earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she is.
Nancy, would you say a few words about the next week's session?
Somebody has to.
Okay, there you go. Sure.
Yeah, can you yeah, please say a few words, and we have to close and dedicate a merit.
Okay, I will be happy to. Venerable Jia is a nun based at the Great Compassion Academy, Dabei Xueyuan in Taipei, and she has, along with a fellow nun, been leading the Buddhist hospice movement, teaching people how to care and to be with dying patients in Taiwan. And it's really a very remarkable group. This year, they were actually awarded the International Outstanding Woman in Buddhism Award in Thailand. And I'm very, very excited to be able to speak with them and have a copy of their book on my bookshelf right now. Thank you, Dr. Ye.
Okay. Now we go back to Mr. Yong to dedicate the merit.
Master Young?
So you want to do something, right?
Oh, okay. I can. Basically, we wanted to use Dharma Master Sher's dedication of merit because that's the one we use in our group. And I see some of our group members from Mexico are online. Very happy about that. So let me share the screen real quick. Share sound. Okay.
To make sure it's a video mode. Right?
Do you mean optimize for video or?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Optimize for video too. Okay. See if this works. Everyone can see.
May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward, may all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise.
Maybe we can make 3 bows to the Buddhas. And 3 bows to Venerable Master Hua. Amitofo. Good night, everyone.
So thank you, everyone, all the audience, and Dhamma Master Young, any word you want to say before? Well, thank you.
The two speakers and also Dr. Ye for the moderation, okay, and everyone's participation and radio's technical support. Amitofo.
Amitofo.
Thank you to everyone, the translators.
Thank you.